Hey, how is everybody doing today? Well, I wanted to share with you all a couple of things that have come to mind as I've been processing this paperwork and uh, working on holding these public servants accountable and bringing the truth to the light. Uh, if in fact these public servants are imposters, then that needs to be brought to light and they need to be brought to quote unquote justice. So, first thing I want to share with you all is a phrase you may have heard at one point or time in your life. And the phrase is this: give them an inch, they take a mile. You've probably heard it before. And the reason why I bring this phrase up is simply because looking back on what I have experienced, this is exactly what these public servants are doing. We, the people, have given them the inch by uh, allowing them to have authority to operate in the capacity that they are in to do their jobs, uh, under the premise that the decisions that they make only benefit the community as a whole and not cause harm. But we'll set that aside for right now. Um, so that we've given them an inch. We, the people, have given them an inch to allow them to operate in these capacities, to be public servants. Now, as public servants, they unfortunately have taken a mile. Now, I don't know if it's because they work for a foreign government, because most of these politicians are bar registered attorneys, which, if you do your research and your homework, you would find out that the Bar Association is an extension of the British monarchy. It's a British accreditation registry. Now, you take that coupled with the fact that many of these attorneys, like Donald Mason, uh, who's a bar registered attorney, see, he uses the title Esquire, like many of these attorneys do. Now, he claims that it was given to him by the Supreme Court of Ohio, and they granted him the title, and that's where he got it from. That's why he uses it. However, I hate to break it to you, Donald, and all you attorneys out there, but that's unauthorized. It says very clearly in the Constitution that no one is authorized to have a title of nobility. And I'm slightly paraphrasing there. You can read it for yourself. I don't recall what the exact article and section is, but you can look it up yourself. It says very clearly that titles of nobility are not authorized. Esquire, which these attorneys use and claim to have been given to them by the Supreme Court of Ohio, is not authorized by the Constitution. So therefore, they're blatantly violating the Constitution by walking around and promoting this title of nobility, because that's what Esquire is. They're considering themselves a squire, which is one step down from a knight. If you think back, consider the what they call medieval times or early Europe. Um, the squire was essentially the helper, or it's basically like one step down from a knight, and so uh, it's a title of nobility that is given by the British monarchy. That's where, as far as I know, it may have originated from. I'm not 100% sure if it's the origination place of that concept or if they just carried it on from somewhere else. However, it makes no difference. Uh, when you couple all of these bits of information together, it starts to create a puzzle. The pieces start to come together. Um, and when you realize that it's many of these esquires that are utilizing the courts in a perverted manner. See, many of these esquires seem to think, especially here in Ohio and states that have a home rule status, they think that if they have a court hearing or proceeding or case, whatever you want to call it, and if the losing party happens to use Ohio Revised Codes or cite constitutional sections or articles or amendments in their defense or in their argument, and they lose, the Esquires, apparently, this is what it's been conveyed to me, or what has been conveyed to me, is that these Esquires deem the codes and statutes and laws that were used in the losing party's arguments as invalid. So, the concept that's been conveyed to me, based on what I went through and experienced in the court, was that they manipulated the court to get a specific outcome because they think that if there's an outcome that's in their favor, basically, or I don't know if I'm saying that right. Basically, they were trying to invalidate in their mind the constitutional sections and the particular laws and codes and statutes that I was citing that they were violating. They being the public servants in different capacities, different public servants that I was dealing with at various times that I've outlined in documents that I've written. See, these Esquires think that the codes and statutes and the constitutional sections that I used in my arguments, just because they manipulated the court and procured the win, which was unlawful, because they ignored exculpatory evidence and so on and so forth. But anyways, they deem the codes and statutes and the constitutional citations that I included in my defense as invalid in the local area. I don't know where they get this idea from, because it's a complete perversion and just delusional idea of reality, because the Constitution is extremely clear and explains what these public servants are allowed to do and not allowed to do. And what they are doing is some of the things that they are not allowed to do according to the Constitution. But unless we, the people, speak up and first of all, you have to become aware of it and know what's going on and identify the problem before you can even begin to address the problem. So if many of you all are just drinking Kool-Aid and think that these public servants always have the community's best interest at heart and everything that they do benefits the community, then you are an idiot. And somebody should probably slap the shit out of you. Not that I condone violence, but just, making the point. This is exactly why things are the way they are, because we, the people, are not holding these public servants accountable, and we give them too much authority. See, now, in many places, and especially here in Ohio, these public servants almost act as if they are royalty, as if they're better than the rest of society. Now, in some instances, that might be the case. But, I mean, is it really worth arguing over which piece of shit is the least stinkiest in the toilet bowl? I mean, quite frankly, they all stink. It's really arbitrary to decide which one is less stinky, because ultimately it doesn't matter. They just need to be flushed down the toilet. So I want you to keep that in mind. The home rule status for the state that these Esquires, these, dare I say, traitors, are taking advantage of and, using to their advantage, I should say, or taking, however you want to say it, that needs to be repealed. The home rule status for Ohio needs to be removed entirely and outlawed, because essentially home rule status for any state is a gateway to authoritarian rule or tyranny and treason, essentially, because eventually these people without accountability get empowered after each time that they get away with their crimes. They get more and more empowered, and they keep taking more and more. Give them an inch to take a mile. They keep taking more and more miles. And I mean, look around. We have less freedoms now than we ever have, especially since 2001 and the Patriot Act. Now, I'm not willing to give up any of my rights or freedoms. Unfortunately, some of those have been taken from me, and I'm working to right that wrong. Uh, and that's only because the people here in the local area have not been paying attention. They've been asleep at the wheel. Uh, Too busy doing other things than being adults and holding these people accountable. So, yeah, with all that being said, to sum it up, the home rule status, the home rule state designation needs to be repealed and utterly removed, entirely removed from Ohio. Um, this is the only way that we the people will be able to have a standard set for the government across the state. So that way, when we go into different cities and villages and municipalities, they don't have different ideas of how the law works. So then you've got to figure out what the hell they think they can and can't do and have to adjust. It doesn't work that way. There's supposed to be a set standard of the law, a set standard of the government, so it's the same no matter where we go, with few subtle differences. But essentially, our rights and liberties and freedoms should be the same no matter where we go across the country. In any of the 50 states, it doesn't matter. Those rights, freedoms, and liberties must be extended to we the people in every place. Or at every place, I guess I should say. Or on every place. I guess on every place is a better way to say it. Because we're on the land. If you're in the state, you're in the corporation. That's the wording that they use. See, we just think in the state, we're in the geographical area, but our concepts are not the concepts that they use. See, they have a different connotation, and so when they ask if you are in the state of Ohio, they're not asking if you're in the geographical area called Ohio. They're asking you if you are in the corporation of Ohio. They're asking you basically if you're an employee. That's essentially what it is. They're asking if you're a corporate individual. And once you say yes, because you don't realize what you're saying yes to, you've basically told them that yes, I'm an employee, or yes, I'm a corporate individual, and I have no rights. And technically, because they have authority over representatives of the state, they then can do whatever they want. And that's essentially what I experienced. Now, I didn't willingly give them jurisdiction. I was forced to do that. They threatened my life. They threatened my safety and my health. And if I didn't comply with their demands, they would throw me back in a cage, and I never knew when the hell I was going to get out. After 40 days or so, it starts to look pretty bleak as far as them doing the right thing. And so at some point, I have to make decisions so that way I can at least try to get ahead of what they were doing. Because if I didn't, well, then I would have been buried by it. So, without going too far off topic, I want you to keep that in mind. The home rule status of the state needs to be removed immediately. Period. Call your state representatives, write them letters. And if you don't know what it means, if you don't understand what the home rule status is, look it up and learn about it. Educate yourself. This is what these politicians and attorneys are using to subvert your rights and your freedoms and your liberties and degrade our communities. So, excuse me. With that being said, the second thing I wanted to mention is mortgage fraud. Now, I'm going through a process now that I am as far as I know, if I understand the process or comprehend, I should say, the process correctly, um, once complete this process, this property should be entirely removed from the tax registry. So that way, the county can't assess any taxes to the property as if they're selling it every year and trying to tell me that I need to pay them X amount of dollars as if I'm selling the property every year. Because that's, I mean, it's not even technically really lawful, but um, that's the only time you're supposed to pay tax, technically, if it's even mandatory, is sales tax. So unless a property owner sells a property and makes profit off of it, the property owner should not be paying taxes every year because the county and possibly the municipality has what's known as a marketable title, or there's a couple of other types of or deeds, types of titles and deeds that are created. They utilize these documents to essentially uh, sell the property without selling it. I mean, they don't sell it technically, but it's I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like a Ponzi scheme. Um, so anyway, I go through the process. I went down and got a certified copy of the warranty deed. I filled out a document, or not filled out, but I hand wrote a document acknowledging the deed, and I got the information from Rob Ryder, Robbyder, I believe. I think that's how it's spelled, on YouTube. He's a staff sergeant, former staff sergeant of the Army, and he has a video. I think it's called "Accept the Deed and Be the Owner" or something to that effect. And if you go on to his channel and you watch that video, it explains to you the process that I'm going through. And so I'm going to be submitting the warranty deed with the acknowledgement that's notarized to the county recorder, and essentially that's going to establish myself as the official owner, and I will own the what's the term? I think it's equitable title. It might be a allodial title. I'm not 100% sure on the terminologies. And so that at that point, they cannot assess taxes to it because it won't be in their system anymore. Once I acknowledge the warranty deed, every other action, every other contract, every other agreement, every other bit of interest that had been established up until that point must be transferred to me. So that's one of the processes I'm going through. And that may very well by itself stop this fraudulent foreclosure process. And let me explain to you why it's fraudulent. Everyone that has what they call a mortgage, that has bought a piece of property, see, what they've done is they've lied to you. When you signed the paperwork to purchase the property, that document or those documents that you signed, potentially a series of documents, I can't recall. It's been a while since I've signed all that paperwork at the title office. But essentially, I kind of lost my train of thought. This gets a little bit confusing sometimes with all this rigmarole. So, anyways, let me back up a little bit and just kind of get back on track. So the mortgage fraud, what they do when you sign the documents, when you go to purchase a property, is they take the document that you signed, that you endorsed or sealed with your endorsement. That document they call a contract or an agreement. And what they consider that is the mortgage that you're agreeing to pay over 30 years for money that they supposedly lent to you, or essentially lent to you to purchase the property. However, this is a lie. The banks don't give any of their money. Period. What they do is they take the documents that we sign when we purchase a property. And what that document is, because there's only a single party signature on it. There's not two parties and a witness, which would be an actual contract. It's called a bilateral contract, where you have two parties that are fully informed, that have a complete and total meeting of the minds on the agreement, and therefore enter into the agreement and create the contract. That's not what happens during a mortgage. What happens during a mortgage is they take the document that you sign with your endorsement, or you seal with your endorsement, and what that document is actually called is a negotiable instrument. Now, if you look up negotiable instrument, the definition, and you learn about negotiable instruments, you'll realize that we use negotiable instruments all the time, every day. Checks, money orders, the coupon at the bottom of the bill that comes for utility or services or whatever that you might use and get bills in the mail for. The portion at the bottom of the bill that you tear off, called the coupon, that you're supposed to send back with the payment. See, these things are called negotiable instruments. And essentially, they're all like checks or like money orders. It's the same concept. Now, another type of a negotiable instrument is cash. Federal Reserve notes. The stuff that we call money or cash. Those are actually negotiable instruments. If you look at the piece of paper, it has some fancy writing and fancy artwork on it, but it has the basic 8 essential elements for a document to be considered a negotiable instrument. And so it's been created. The negotiable instrument was created by the Federal Reserve. They traded that negotiable instrument for other negotiable instruments called bonds from the federal government. So they exchanged these negotiable instruments and then disperse them however they see fit, basically. Now, the same thing happens with the financial institution when we go through the process of purchasing a property. See, much like those bonds that are traded for Federal Reserve notes, the financial institution, or what they call the mortgage company, quote unquote, takes the negotiable instrument that you endorse or sign, or seal with your endorsement, rather. They take that negotiable instrument and they convert it into Federal Reserve notes through the U.S. Treasury. So that's why there's an escrow, I think that's what they call it, that time frame from when you sign the documents to when you actually take possession. It's roughly 30 to 45 days, can be a little bit longer. But typically it's right around there, like 30 to 45 days. Now, when you look into this, that's about how long it takes the Treasury to convert a negotiable instrument, to process the paperwork, because there has to be additional forms and documents filed with a negotiable instrument for it to be processed correctly. And so what the financial institutions do is they take the document that you create, they accept it for the value that's on the document. So, for example, this property that I own is valued at $105,000, or was valued at $105,000. It's worth more now. So the initial so-called quote-unquote loan was for $105,000. Now, the bank or financial institution didn't loan me anything. See, I actually loaned them funds. See, when I created the negotiable instrument by sealing it with my endorsement, they then accepted that negotiable instrument for value, just like we accept cash for the amount that's on it. And we accepted it has that value. So that way we can use that, quote, currency, end quote, to conduct business. So the negotiable instrument that we create through the mortgage process, or what they call the mortgage process, is actually us, we the people, lending the financial institutions funds, because we're creating the value. The banks or financial institutions don't create the value. They don't have value unless we give them value. So they accept the negotiable instrument that's created during the process for value. So in this situation here, the financial institution or bank accepted the negotiable instrument for $105,000. They then took that document, the negotiable instrument, and sent it off and filed it with the Treasury. And the Treasury sent them back Federal Reserve notes as a refund in the amount of $105,000. So, what the bank then thinks is that that's their money, and that they think that they are loaning that money to me, the quote unquote buyer. However, this is a perversion of the truth. So they were already paid by the negotiable instrument because the value was created at the time of the sealing by the with the endorsement of the document of the negotiable instrument. When they accepted that document, the property was paid for in full. Period. I don't care if you don't believe me or not. If you don't, then look it up yourself. I'm not going to argue with you. I don't care what you think, because you're wrong. They commit fraud by tricking people into thinking that they're lending their money to people to purchase properties, when in fact it's the people that's lending the financial institution the funds to be able to conduct the business, because the financial institution has an obligation to act as a fiduciary when processing a transaction for a beneficiary. And if you realize that you're a beneficiary of the public trust, the CEST KV trust, or the CEST K trust, however you want to phrase it, this trust, or these trusts, are set up for us to do business, conduct business. And that's what acts as the security for transactions that we conduct. So what they're essentially doing is they're committing trust fraud. Because you don't realize you're the beneficiary, they ignore their fiduciary obligation to only make decisions that benefit the beneficiary. So if they acted appropriately, they would accept the negotiable instrument that's created during the process of signing the paperwork for the property and so forth, trade that for Federal Reserve notes, and then take those Federal Reserve notes and give them to the seller of the property. And of course, they can make a fee on it too. They can add a fee to the overall cost of the property, so that way they can make a fee to pay them for their services. However, it's not supposed to be 100 or 200% of the original amount, because that's essentially what they're doing. Over 30 years, people are paying back 2 or 3 times the amount and value of the property that they're purchasing. And granted, some of that, a portion goes to homeowners insurance, and another portion goes to taxes, property taxes, and it's broken up for all those things, and only some of it goes to the principal. And of course, they have that amortization where it changes how much of the payment goes to the principal and how much goes to interest over time. And of course, right there for the first couple of years of a so-called mortgage, a majority of your payments go towards interest. Only a small fraction actually goes towards the principal, because they want their money up front. They're greedy bastards, and they know it's only a matter of time before people catch on, and so they want to get as much money as they can up front. And this is just my opinion, by the way, but they want to get as much money up front before people catch on, and then put them on notice for fraud and hold them accountable. Because then, even though they're think of it in this concept. Look at DuPont. For the havoc that they wreaked down in the Ohio River Valley with all the people that got sick from all the chemicals coming out of that Teflon plant, even though they paid out restitutions and settlements for the harm that they caused, they still profited a ton of money off of that plant. So the money that they paid out in restitutions and settlements was a fraction of the profits that they made off that plant. So just take that into consideration. And the same thing goes for these banks. It's really no different. They're going to make as much profit as they can, and as quickly as they can. So that way, if something does happen, well, they're still going to profit in the end. Because the odds are stacked against us, we the people, see, the purchaser. because they have gotten away with this for so long, because people don't realize the truth, and for generations, I don't know when this began uh, necessarily, but I mean, this kind of thing has probably been going on for generations, and people just haven't been paying attention. They don't know their rights. They don't know their freedoms or liberties, and because people are stupid, and I'm one of those people. I make stupid mistakes all the time. I'm not an expert. I'm not perfect. Um, they've gotten away with it, and it empowers them. And so now, what these people are doing, these public servants are doing, is and the with in collusion with the esquires, is see an attorney will create an action in a court called a foreclosure. Now this is additional fraud. This is additional conspiracy to commit fraud on top of the fraud that was already committed in the original process or transaction of the purchase. So they're doubling down, and even though they already got paid, and they're still making money off of payments and tax write-offs and all of these subsidies and other things and all the assistance that the government is providing to property owners so that way they can pay these greedy bastards money that they don't even technically owe them. It's all kind of a Ponzi scheme. That's the only real term I can constantly think about or consider when I'm thinking about these ideas and what these people are doing. It's a Ponzi scheme, and there might be another concept that's more befitting of the situation, but that's just for some reason that's all I can come up with and think of right now is a Ponzi scheme. But anyways, as I digress, so what they're doing, the esquires are conspiring with these other public servants in the court, these other attorneys and so forth, and so-called judges. They're not judges; a bunch of imposters. Um, they're creating what's called foreclosures, and so even though the money technically isn't owed to the financial institution, what they are doing is they are allowing the courts and the county to repossess the property, and they go through a process of a sheriff's sale and sell off the property for profit. So technically, they steal the property from the technical property owner and sell it off at an extreme discount, and then of course they profit from that. See how that works? So they don't have standing in the courts. These attorneys, these esquires, don't have standing in the courts. Um, they are acting on hearsay and not personal knowledge. And on top of that, because of the fact of the original fraud in the transaction of the purchase of the property, they are creating a how should I say, a more egregious fraudulent pattern of activity because, like I said, they're doubling down. Now they're trying to steal the property out from underneath the rightful owner who has already paid for the property with the negotiable instrument that was created in the first place. Because, and this may be strange to you, ever since 1933, when the government did away with the gold standard and basically said we can't use gold and silver to conduct business, we have to use negotiable instruments. That's when they created the birth certificate system and monetized those and created that whole system to collateralize the people against the debt rather than having the gold in the what do you call it, in the vaults, in the not coffers, there's another term. Anyways, so if you look up the changes they made to the Emergency Banking Act back in early 1900s, I think it was like 1933, roughly 1930 something, or right around there. I'm probably off on that date. But look at the changes they made to the Emergency Banking Act and also the Trading with the Enemy Act about that same time frame, give or take about 10 years or so. It's roughly in that time frame there, early 1900s. And that's what paved the way to allow them to monetize or collateralize, is a better word, we the people against the debt. And so they turned us into what they call chattel. We're nothing more than products to them. Uh, Nothing more than products or um, supply sitting on a shelf somewhere. Or um, let's see, what's another good example? Well, like commodities. They trade commodities on the stock market, and they also create what they call futures based off of speculation and so forth. And they do the same thing with we the people, utilizing the birth certificate and the Social Security account through the Social Security Administration. If you do your research, you look it up yourself, you can figure it out. The QSIP numbers on the back of the Social Security card and the birth certificate uh, generally associate. Well, I don't know if generally is the right word to use. Um, they are linked to trust accounts. If you can go to Dun and Bradstreet and you can look up the QSIP number of your particular documents, your birth certificate or the birth certificate and the Social Security card, and you can look up the value of those particular accounts. And in many instances, when people look up these accounts, they find out that these accounts are worth millions of dollars. Some of them worth billions, because the government deposits money into these accounts to create value, so that way they can borrow money or funds from other countries and use these accounts as collateral. Um, so that's essentially that's how it works. And again, don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself. I'm just telling you what I've learned, and based on the laws that are established and the processes that are established, um, and how it should work. Not based on how it's working now and all these popular misconcepts, um, or popular misconceptions is the right word, but how it's supposed to work. And so the courts, the court officials are conspiring with the esquires and the attorneys to, I mean, let's face it, they're pretty much all attorneys anyways. They're all part of the bar association. They're all conspiring together to not only subvert the Constitution and the rule of law, but they're also uh, stealing from people. I mean, after all, they've already stolen from me. The municipal corporation did anyway. They stole my gun, and don't seem to have a problem with violating the Second Amendment. Um, on top of the other egregious violations and crimes that they've committed. Um, but now they want to steal the property out from underneath me too. Um, like I said, criminals, when they get away with their crimes, become more and more empowered. And so typically, a criminal that's getting away with their crimes will double down and try something a little bit more risky. I guess that's a good way to describe it. And so that's what these people are doing. They've already tried to destroy me throughout this whole process over the last roughly 4 years. Actually, it has been 4 years now. Um, but it hasn't worked. All completely in their favor. In fact, in many, and probably I should say in all instances, it either has or it is or it will be backfiring in their face, because they didn't follow the law. They didn't follow uh, their obligations and duties, and they didn't act accordingly. Um, and so this is just par for the course, I guess. So I'm not really surprised. But anyways, to convey the information to you all, so you all understand or comprehend is a better word, what I'm talking about and what you can do is, like I said, go to Rob Ryder YouTube channel, Rob Ryder's YouTube channel, and watch the video that he has titled, I believe it's "Accept the Deed and Become the Owner," something to that effect. He's got a lot of good content over there about different legal and lawful ideas and concepts. So I definitely highly recommend you all going to checking out his channel. Um, But that's the process that I'm going through to establish the warranty deed and to establish me as the rightful owner and holder in due course of the property, and uh, essentially voiding any interest that the county or any of these municipal corporations um, or any other financial institutions would have. And if I remember correctly, it might even void what they call the mortgage, um, because the mortgage is only able to stand when there's not a rightful owner. When the county can assume the marketable, I think it's marketable title. I think that's what it is. Um, they've found a way to manipulate the process so that way they can assess taxes and profit off of it in that way. So yeah, go check out Rob Ryder's channel. Learn about that process. Go get your certified copy of your warranty deed for your property, and learn how to go through that process. I'm going to be submitting the documents to the county recorder in the morning and making that official, and then I'll be getting several copies, certified copies of that official deed, and then also I'm going to be filing some paperwork with the court. I kind of went over some of the questions that I'm going to be asking the court, constitutional questions, asking specifically if the judicial officers and I can't remember the terminology, I think it's representative, something like that, if they are constitutionally qualified to enforce the law and adjudicate the matter. So if they don't have certain things in place, like a oath of office, if it hasn't been filed properly in the correct place, if they don't have their governor's commission, if it's required, and if there's other things that they don't have in the right places, if they didn't cross their T's and dot their I's when taking their positions and assuming their positions, then they are in fact illegitimate, and they need to be forcibly removed. And any decisions that they made will be rendered null and void, and they should be arrested for impersonating an officer and thrown in jail and tried for their crimes because they didn't take the steps necessary to validate and legitimize their position. So therefore, technically, they are breaking the law and they're impersonating an officer, which is a very serious offense at any level, whether it's municipal, county, state, or federal. Impersonating an officer is a very serious offense. And so, unfortunately, many people give these public servants too much credit and overlook too many of these mistakes or shortcomings or failures, and make excuses for it. Oh, well, they're busy. They do a lot. They do a lot to protect the community. That's the bullshit people think. What they don't realize is they're actually creating a lot of the problems for the community. But because many people are drinking the Kool-Aid and stupid, they buy into it and they just blindly call them heroes. And, oh, well, we got to bend over backwards for these people, and we got to give them everything we own if they ask for it, because that's what heroes deserve, right? Give me a break. These people aren't heroes. I've known more courageous and more valiant people, men and women, than any of these idiots that can't seem to pay attention to the established law and do the right thing. I've known people to make sacrifices above and beyond what these people would ever be willing to make. So these people don't deserve being called heroes, because they're not. They may provide some helpful services occasionally to the community, specific individuals, probably friends and family and buddies. But to the majority of us, no. That seems to me very apparently that they view us, or view me anyway, as the enemy, and refuse to do their jobs and would rather attack me. But I don't want to get into all that. So, yeah, with all that being said, give them an inch, they take a mile. Kind of goes without saying, but I said it anyway. Mortgage fraud. Be aware that if you consider yourself a property owner, If you've purchased a property and you're paying a mortgage, um, grow up because you don't need to. And you can learn about that, how it's a fraud. Research negotiable instruments, how negotiable instruments are created, the different types of negotiable instruments, and then go back and study the process of the transaction of the purchase of the property. And you'll realize when you look at the documentation that they don't have what they say they have. They don't have a bilateral contract. They don't have a contract or an agreement. What they have is a defrauded man or a woman uh, accepting terms that they're not fully aware of because they haven't been uh, fully informed. Because they haven't explained the situation properly to the purchaser. Um, like I said, because we're stupid and we don't realize that we're creating negotiable instruments and we're basically giving these financial institutions uh, everything. We're giving them the amount of the negotiable instrument that we create for the value of the property that we're purchasing. They then take that document and trade it for Federal Reserve notes that they then deposit into their accounts. And when they do that, according to modern money mechanics and the expansion of the dollar, they then create up to 9 times that amount. So just put this into perspective real quick. So this property that I have is was valued at $105,000 at the time of purchase. So I created a negotiable instrument for $105,000. I gave that $105,000 instrument to the financial institution. They accepted it for $105,000. So at that point, they made $105,000 that they needed to convert to Federal Reserve notes. That way, they could pay off the property because the seller, the sellers typically want Federal Reserve notes for the sale. They don't want a document known as a negotiable instrument. They don't know what to do with it, and it's just not typical. So what the bank does is the bank takes your negotiable instrument, converts it for Federal Reserve notes. So what they did for me is they converted the negotiable instrument for $105,000 into $105,000 worth of Federal Reserve notes, deposited it into their accounts. And then what they do is, according to the expansion of the dollar, they can create up to 9 times that amount. So $105,000, do the math, they can create up to 9 times that amount. So that's $945,000 that they create on top of the original $105,000. So that's $1,050,000 that they at that point have technically profited. Now they take the $105,000 for the original transaction and they pay off the property with that. So then they have the $945,000 that they created through the expansion of the dollar process when they put the money into their accounts or the funds into their accounts. Then they claim to have loaned money to me, the purchaser or the buyer. And so then over 30 years, I pay them X amount of dollars. And when I did the math over 30 years, let's see, the payment I think was like $800 for the mortgage a month for 30 years. So when I did the math, it came out to like, I want to say it was somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 over 30 years was the total amount that I would be paying for the property. And again, a fraction of that or a portion of that is for homeowners insurance, and there's portions there for property taxes that got paid out of that amount. So, but still, ultimately that money goes to the bank. Then the bank decides to divvy up the amounts to go to wherever for whether it's property taxes or homeowners insurance, that sort of thing. So over 30 years, essentially, they're making back if not 100% of the amount on top of the profit that they've already made, possibly 200% of the value paid back to them over 30 years. So then that's an additional, in this case, that'd be an additional $210,000 roughly that they would get on top of the $945,000. So, or excuse me, 210 plus the 945, so that'd be roughly 1,055,000 that they would profit in total off of the original negotiable instrument for $105,000. Now they paid in that process, they paid the property off when they converted the negotiable instrument into Federal Reserve notes, but then created much more profit for themselves by utilizing the process of expansion of the dollar, and then they loan out that money, or quote unquote loan out that money, which isn't technically theirs. They've stolen it, actually, in my opinion, and then use that for other loans and other purposes to either expand their business or to loan it out to other people for other things. And for like smaller, there's different other types of transactions that are used, like personal loans, that sort of thing. But even those, most of the time, there's still, when you're signing those documents, you're not signing a bilateral contract. You're signing a negotiable instrument. So even in personal loans, these financial institutions are doing the same thing. They're taking the negotiable instrument and they're trading it for Federal Reserve notes, and then they're creating additional value where there wasn't before, and then telling you got to pay them money that technically you loaned them. Because let me put it to you this way: when a loan is paid off, if it was a contract, the contract should be returned to the original signer, the original purchaser, if you will, or they like to call them debtors. So when a loan, if it was in the context that these financial institutions and banks like to say, or put it in, if they in fact loaned out money, their money, then when the loan is paid off, that original contract should be returned to the so-called debtor. But they never do this because they don't have the original contract. The original contract is gone because they sell it on the open market or trade it with the Treasury for Federal Reserve notes, and at that point, it goes into a process of being traded on the stock market. It's if I remember right, I think it's called a security at that point. And so they trade those on the stock market. And so they can never return the original negotiable instrument that we sign to purchase a property. So that proves that there is no contract, because if there was a contract, they would still have it. They'd be able to return the contract, but they can't. Ask your financial institution. Pay off your loan and go ask them for the original contract back, the contract with the right signatures. Tell them you want that back because the contract has been fulfilled and that contract needs to be returned to the original creator. But they don't do this because they can't. That proves the fraud. Because it's not a contract, it's a negotiable instrument that they trade off or sell off and go through that whole process that I explained. So this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm trying to convey to you all, aside from the other experiences that I've had and the other information I'm trying to convey to you all, dealing with these courts and these public servants and this whole process, because in a way it's all tied together, kind of loosely, but it's all tied together in the context that it's all a pattern of usurpations and abuses of authority by these public servants. I have plenty of evidence of the abuses of process and the malicious prosecutions performed by these public servants. Specifically, Michael T. Hughes. What's his name? Ronald Welch, uh, David Tarbert, Emily Tarbert, and the other uh, public servants. I'll be kind, or I'll keep it PG, I guess. Um, yeah, all these public servants. Yeah, it's a shame. They're conspiring together, and so like I said, this is all in one way, shape, or form connected, uh, and ultimately proves a pattern of abusive authority, or how did I state that? Uh, Basically, abuse of power, abuse of authority. Um, so I mean, it's a violation of so many. What they've done is they violated so many different laws and codes, federal and state, and even local municipal codes. But they don't pay attention to that. They think they're above the law because there's no accountability here because of the home rule status. The state, no agencies within the state, technically, according to these people, hasn't no institutions or agencies within the state has any oversight over the municipal governments. So if we get rid of the home rule status, then we can bring accountability to these communities, public servants, and we can stop this kind of treason and stop these traitors from destroying the country. Because that's what's going on. Look around you. I'm not talking about the Roe v. Wade, whether that, this, that, or the other thing. Those are distractions. Now, in my opinion, just for conversation's sake, since I mentioned it, I think it's a good thing that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And that's my opinion. If you don't like my opinion, I don't give a shit. I don't think murdering babies is ever acceptable. Period. I don't care what the situation is. No one should have a right to take another human's life, or man or woman's life, or being's life, or whatever you want to call what we are. Because that can be I don't know, a bit confusing as well, because, I mean, without getting into too much of it, a human is a cut apart person, or a cut apart man or woman. Hew, man, you're a hewed man. You're torn apart forcibly. That's what, to hew something. It's to tear apart or to cut apart forcibly. So you're a separated man. You're not a whole person. You're not a whole man or woman. So that's what that means when you call yourself a human, or you call other people humans. See, these words we don't always know realize the context of, or the meanings in the context that we're using them. And so they mean something else. And so many times we're saying things that we don't realize what they're saying. Like when we say we understand. When somebody asks you, when one of these public servants asks you if you understand, they're not asking you if you comprehend what they're saying. They're asking you if you stand under their authority. And when you or I or anybody looks at them and says, yeah, I understand, well, your rights just went out the freaking window. Because they're not asking, we think they're asking us if we comprehend what they're saying. Well, of course I understand English. Of course I got God-given ears I can hear. But that's not what they're asking. See, it's a play on words. It's trickery. And because you don't know any better, and especially you don't know how to get yourself out of the situation you've put yourself in, and because most people think that, oh, well, I got in trouble, so I have to go to an attorney and have an attorney take care of it for me. Because they never grew up and learned how to be an adult and handle their own matters and affairs. I was like this too. Still am in some ways. But at least I'm trying to learn. At least I'm doing what I can to learn what I need to handle my own affairs and not leave my fate up to some idiot or pettifogger or shyster. Because if you conduct business with people that commit fraud, you're probably gonna get stolen from, or be a victim of fraud, I should say. I don't know. I mean, that should be common sense, but you know, common sense isn't common these days. So I want you all to think about this, and like I said, do a little bit of homework. Go check out Rob Ryder's YouTube channel. Check out the Accept the Deed and Become the Owner video, as well as his other videos as well. Also, that he covers many different topics. Um, but he has some good, honest content over there. Um, so, yeah, go check him out. Do what you can to learn how to uh, assert yourself in the situations that you need to stand up for your rights and your freedoms and your liberties. Because if not, they're going to take them. You give them an inch, they're going to take a mile.